What's going on, everybody? Khalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Nokia G400 5G and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Now before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button. And if you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about each of them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Nokia G400 5G, we're getting a 6.58-inch 120Hz IPS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 401, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a 6.4-inch 120Hz dynamic AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 411, and an aspect ratio of 20:9 as well. So for what they are, both phones do have really good displays, but each does have its own advantage. On one hand, with the Nokia G400 5G, as you can kind of see, at 6.58 inches versus 6.4, the Nokia is a little bit larger, so if you're doing something like reading, for example, things are going to be a little bit easier to see. But honestly, in general, this difference, while it may be important to some, in my opinion, really isn't that big a deal, because it's not like the S21 FE is small per se, it's just not quite as big as the Nokia G400. But that being said, of course, if you do want the largest display between the two, then definitely keep this in mind. On the other hand though, with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, I would say the image quality is quite a bit better. With the dynamic AMOLED versus an IPS LCD, the colors are going to look a lot better on the S21 FE, the screen is also quite a bit brighter, and the viewing angles are a lot better as well. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, the S21 FE is going to be quite a bit easier to see. So in general, if you're really going to be consuming a lot of content, especially stuff like watching videos, playing games, and things where the image quality really matters a lot, I would definitely go with the S21 FE. But if you want the larger display between the two, or you're just not too concerned about the image quality, maybe you want it to look nice, but you still don't need the absolute best, in that case, the Nokia G400 5G will be just fine. Now for storage, with the Nokia G400 5G, we're getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the S21 FE, we're getting 128GB. But unfortunately, this phone does not have microSD card expansion. Now in general, seeing that the S21 FE has double the storage of the Nokia G400 5G, I feel like with the microSD card expansion, it's not really that big a deal, because if you're downloading stuff like apps, games, stuff like that, a microSD card really isn't going to help out a whole lot with that. But on the other hand, with 128GB of internal storage, that's going to be plenty of storage for most people. In addition to this, with the S21 FE, there is another variant of this phone that has 256. So if you really want a ton of internal storage, then I would definitely go with the S21 FE. That being said though, for the average user, as long as you're mindful of what you're putting on your phone, and you make sure to use a microSD card whenever you can, the storage you get with the Nokia G400 5G is at least going to be acceptable. Now for security features, both phones have face unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners as well. With the Nokia G400 5G, it's right here on the power key, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, it's right here in the display. But starting with the Nokia, let's go ahead and give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Samsung. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both were real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, remember, both phones do have face unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Nokia G400 5G, we got a water drop notch for the front facing camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. For video, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p at 60 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras, so unfortunately no 4K here, but at least with the 1080p videos, if you want, you always can record in a slightly higher frame rate. Now with the S21 FE, we got a real nice looking hole punch design for the front facing camera. This camera is 32 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 12 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. And then for video, the S21 FE can record in 4K at 60 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras. So between the two, I would definitely say, if you're going to be recording lots of videos, definitely go with the S21 FE, especially if the quality is really important to you. I can tell you from experience, most of the videos on this channel are actually recorded with this exact phone, and I would say in general, whether it's 4K or 1080p, it's all turned out real well. So if you are more of a content creator, I highly recommend this phone. And the same goes for the photos as well. On one hand, with the Nokia G400 5G, first of all, we do get a decent amount of features here, no macro camera unfortunately, but at least it does have an ultra wide camera, so that's definitely a nice thing. And when it comes to the photo quality, well, it's definitely not near flagship level. For the average user, for more casual use like social media posts and stuff like that, it will at least get the job done, and despite not having the most amazing quality, the photos will still look nice. On the other hand, with the S21 FE, keep in mind, despite still not being as high-end as an S22 Ultra, this still is technically a flagship phone, and as such, the photo quality is going to be flagship level, despite having a 12 megapixel camera versus a 48 megapixel camera with the Nokia G400. The hardware with the S21 FE is just so much higher quality, because again, this phone is just much higher end in general. So overall, if you are going to be taking a lot of photos and you really care about the quality, the S21 FE will be a better choice. In addition to this, although this phone doesn't have a macro camera either, with the telephoto lens, you can still get those close-up detailed images. And in addition to this, not only can you get the same photos you get with a macro camera, but the zoom is also really good. So again, in general, if you're just taking a lot of photos, maybe you're actually into mobile photography or something like that, in that kind of situation, I do think the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be a great choice. But again, if you're more of a casual user and you just need the occasional nice photo every now and then, the Nokia G400 5G still will get the job done. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, with the Nokia G400 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 5G processor. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 5G processor. So when it comes to performance between the two, the S21 FE is so much faster. In fact, I think it's like double the speed or something. Regardless of the exact figure, if you're really going to be on your phone a lot, especially if you're doing stuff like mobile gaming, for example, in that kind of situation, I do think you can definitely justify getting something like the S21 FE, because again, this phone is so much faster, and with this kind of processing power, when you're doing more high performance activities, you're definitely going to get a much better experience. That being said, keep in mind, this of course is a flagship phone, whereas of course, the Nokia G400 5G is really just an entry-level 5G phone. So although obviously the S21 FE is going to be much faster, these phones are clearly made for different things. So if you're doing more basic activities like web browsing, social media, streaming content like videos and music, and you're really just not going to be on your phone all day, in that kind of situation, well of course the S21 FE is still going to be much faster. If that's really all you're doing, the Nokia G400 5G might be all you really need. Now I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both phones, and here are the scores I got. So again, as you can see here, the S21 FE is honestly on a whole different level. So again, if you're a really heavy user, and you're going to be on your phone constantly, especially doing more demanding activities, the S21 FE is probably going to be worth it for you. But again, if you're a more basic user, doing stuff like web browsing, social media, maybe just using the phone as a phone, in that kind of situation, honestly, the Nokia G400 5G is probably all you're going to need. But what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of which phone is going to be a better upgrade for you. You might find that while obviously the S21 FE is the faster phone between the two, the Nokia G400 5G might be a good enough upgrade already. Now for the battery, the Nokia G400 5G actually has a bit of an advantage, with a 5000 mAh battery supporting 20W fast charging versus a 4500 mAh battery that supports 25W fast charging. So while on one hand, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE technically does have better fast charging, the 5W difference compared to a 5000 mAh battery versus 4500 really is not going to matter that much. So in general, if you want the best battery life between the two, then again, the Nokia G400 5G will be a slightly better choice. That being said, the battery with the S21 FE really isn't bad, and keep in mind this phone does have wireless charging, whereas the Nokia doesn't. So if that is a feature you care about, definitely keep this in mind. In addition to this, both phones do have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, keep in mind both phones will be able to do that just fine. As far as software goes, both phones currently have Android 12, but I know for sure the S21 FE is definitely getting Android 13 real soon, as well as several other major updates down the road. On the other hand, with the Nokia G400 5G, I feel like eventually this phone is at least going to get Android 13, but I don't actually know that for sure, and I'm not really sure what the Nokia software support's like. I imagine it's probably not nearly as good as Samsung, so with that in mind, if getting the latest version of Android is really important to you, then I would definitely go with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Another thing to keep in mind here that I feel like I always forget is that with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're not getting a headphone jack, whereas the Nokia G400 5G does have a headphone jack. So if you do have a pair of 3.5mm headphones, then keep in mind with the Nokia G400 5G it's pretty much just like usual, whereas with the S21 FE, you can technically still use them, you're just going to need an adapter. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Now on one hand, you probably already could have guessed going into this video, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is technically the better device here, but in general, it's not going to make the most sense for everyone. If you're just using your phone every now and then for streaming content, browsing the web, using social media, maybe you want to get a couple nice photos every now and then, but you don't need crazy high quality, you don't need really fast performance, and in general, you just need a solid device that's going to get the job done and really nothing else. In that kind of situation, the Nokia G400 5G is really all you're going to need, and since this phone is a lot more affordable, if you are more of a light user, I do think this phone will be a better choice for you. That being said, on the other hand, if you're constantly on your phone, especially doing more demanding activities, or maybe you just want the faster device between the two, and maybe you're taking a lot of photos, and you want an amazing looking display, and some of the more premium features flagship phones have, like wireless charging for example, then I could definitely see getting the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, and in that kind of situation, if you really are more of a heavy user, and you want better performance, a really high quality camera, and some of the more premium flagship features, but you also still don't want to spend $1,400 on something like a Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, I do think the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is not only a much better choice than the Nokia G400 5G, but honestly, this is probably one of the best phones in its price price range. But this concludes my comparison between the Nokia G400 5G and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about each of them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.